To understand this tiny world, we need a big analogy.
Okay.
I'm thinking we imagine an atom as a skyscraper.
Okay, I like that.
Right?
Yeah.
Each floor of this skyscraper represents an atomic shell, a region where electrons can be found.
Okay.
It's just like higher floors are further from the ground.
Right.
Electrons in higher shells are further from the nucleus,
Uh-huh.
which is like the ground floor of the atom.
Exactly.
Okay, so being further from the nucleus, does that mean those electrons are like more energetic?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Being
Okay.
further from the nucleus means they have more energy.
Got it.
And this is all governed by
Yeah.
the laws of quantum mechanics,
Okay.
which basically set the rules for how energy works at the atomic level.
So quantum mechanics is running the show here.
Yes.
Okay.
It's very specific.
So how do we label these electron floors then?
We use what's called the principal quantum number.
Okay.
Or it's like the floor number.
Got it.
So n equals 1 is the first shell closest to the nucleus.
Okay.
N equals 2 is the second,
Uh-huh.
and so on.
So is a simple way to tell us what shell we're talking about?
Yeah, exactly.
But I have a feeling it's not as simple as just like climbing stairs in a building.
No, you're absolutely right. The
Right.
energy difference between those shells isn't always the same.
Okay.
Think of it this way. The jump from the first to the second floor is huge.
Okay.
But going from the 50th to the 51st, not so much.
Makes sense.
Yeah. As you go higher in shell, the energy difference between shells actually decreases.
Okay.
Something to keep in mind. We'll come back to why that's important later.
Filing that away.
Yeah.
All right, now let's zoom in on each floor.
Okay.
In a skyscraper, you have different types of spaces, right?
Yeah.
Like studios, one bedrooms, maybe even a penthouse or two.
Exactly.
So in atoms,
Mhm.
those are like the subshells,
Mhm.
labeled S, P, D, and F. They're within each shell,
Right.
like different apartment types.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With unique shapes and capacities for elections.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's get into the details of these apartment types.
All right.
What's an S subshell like?
A subshell.
Yeah.
Think of it as like a cozy studio apartment.
Okay.
It's got just one orbital
Okay,
and can hold up to 2 electrons.
got it.
Then we've got the p-subshell.
Okay.
That's more like a one-bedroom.
Uh-huh.
It's got 3 orbitals,
Okay.
so it can accommodate up to 6 electrons.
So more orbitals, more electrons.
Exactly.
What about the D and F subshells? Even bigger apartment?
You bet.
Okay.
The d-subshell is our 2-bedroom
Uh-huh.
holding up to 10 electrons in its 5 orbitals.
5 orbitals, okay.
And lastly, the subshell,
Right.
our luxurious penthouse suite,
Nice.
has 7 orbitals
Wow.
and can house a whopping 14 electrons.
Okay, so we've got our skyscraper with different doors or shells,
Right.
each with various types of apartments or subshells
Yeah.
that hold a certain number of electrons.
Mm-hmm.
But where do the electrons actually hang out within those apartments?
Okay.
Like, what's their favorite spot?
That's where orbitals come in. They're
Okay.
like the rooms within those subshell apartments.
Okay.
And it's where you're most likely to find an electron.
So if the subshell is a one-bedroom apartment,
Yeah.
each of its 3 orbitals is like a different room?
Exactly.
Okay. So each electron gets its own room to hang out in.
Well, not so fast.
What?
There's a rule called the Pauli exclusion principle,
Okay.
which says that no 2 electrons in an atom can be in the exact same state.
Okay.
It's kind of like having roommates,
Okay.
like totally different schedules.
Got it.
They're sharing an apartment, but they won't be in the same room at the same time doing the exact same thing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So even within a single orbital room, electrons have to be different somehow?
Exactly.
How do they do that?
They achieve this by having opposite spins.
Okay.
So think of it as like spinning clockwise or counterclockwise.
Mhm.
It's their way of personalizing their space, even if they're sharing an orbital room.
So they've got to be unique.
Yeah.
All right, starting to get the picture here.
Good.
We've got our atomic skyscraper.
Yep.
With floors, which are shells apartments,
Uh-huh.
which are subshells,
Yeah.
and even rooms, which are orbitals for each electron.
I like it.
But how do we keep track of which apartment an electron is in on each floor?
Okay.
It's like we need a building manager's list.
And that's what electron configuration is.
Oh.
It's the map that tells us which orbitals in each shell are occupied by electrons.
So it's how we know who's living where in our atomic skyscraper precisely. Okay.
Now, here's where things get really fascinating.
Okay.
Remember those electrons in higher shells have more energy.
Yeah.
Well, electrons are kind of lazy,
Oh.
and they always want to be in the lowest energy state possible.
I can relate to that.
Right?
Yeah.
They'd all just chill on the ground floor if they
The
could.
ground floor is the best.
Right.
Yeah.
And this tendency for electrons to fill up the lowest energy levels first
Yeah.
is called the Aufbau principle.
Okay, Aufbau principle.
So they start on the ground floor and work their way up.
Okay.
If we were filling our atomic skyscraper,
Yeah.
you'd put electrons in the first floor studios first,
Uh-huh.
then the one bedrooms on the second floor.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
But does that mean a fully occupied building?
Okay.
meaning all the lowest energy levels are filled,
Uh-huh.
makes for a happy atom.
You're onto something.
Okay.
Atoms crave stability.
Okay.
And having a full outermost shell, like a fully occupied top floor,
Yeah.
makes them very stable. It's like having a perfect balance in our skyscraper.
So a full top floor equals a happy atom.
You got it.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've built our atomic skyscraper
Mm-hmm.
with electrons filling up the floors from the ground up.
Yeah.
But you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
things get kind of interesting when atoms don't have a full top floor.
Right.
What's the big deal about having a full outermost shell?
Whoa.
Why should we even care where each electron is hanging out?
It's not just about like knowing their address in the atom.
Yeah.
It's about understanding why atoms act the way they do.
Oh.
Electron configuration.
Uh-huh.
It's like the key to unlocking an atom's personality.
Interesting.
Its chemical behavior.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued.
Okay.
Tell me more.
Think about it this way.
Okay.
Chemical reactions are all about atoms, like giving, taking, or even sharing electrons.
Okay.
Whether an atom wants to bond with another, the type of bond it forms,
Yeah.
how reactive it is.
Okay.
It all comes down to those outermost electrons.
So those outermost electrons, the ones on the top floor,
Yeah.
they're like the social butterflies of the atom.
Exactly. They're the ones interacting with the outside world.
So they determine how an atom will, like, mingle with other atoms.
Exactly.
Okay.
And their arrangement.
Uh-huh.
Whether that top floor is full,
Okay.
half full,
Yeah.
or has vacancies,
Got it.
dictates how eager they are to socialize.
So an atom with a full outermost shell,
Mm-hmm.
like our noble gas friends,
Yeah.
they're happy to just stay home because their setup is ideal.
Exactly. They're stable, unreactive.
But an atom with only a few electrons in its outermost shell,
Right.
they're looking to fill those vacancies
Uh-huh.
to achieve that, like, coveted
Yeah.
noble gas status.
Exactly. They're ready to mingle, to bond,
Uh-huh.
to react.
So electron configuration is like a cheat sheet to predict how an atom will behave.
You got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But hold on, you mentioned that sometimes
Yeah.
a half-filled subshell can also be stable.
Right.
Does that, like, mess with the full top floor rule?
That's a great question.
Okay.
It is an interesting exception.
Okay.
And it comes down to
Yeah.
the subtle energy dynamics within those subshells.
Okay.
Sometimes a half-filled subshell,
Uh-huh.
where each orbital has one electron, creates a special type of balance and stability.
So it's not just about having every room occupied.
Right.
Sometimes it's more about, like, symmetry and
Yeah.
balance within the whole apartment.
Exactly. Think of like a perfectly arranged apartment.
Yeah.
Even if not every room is occupied, it just feels right.
Got it.
Chromium's a classic example.
Okay.
It breaks the usual filling order to achieve a half-filled d-subshell
Okay.
because that's more stable for it.
Wow. Atoms are more complex than I thought.
Yeah.
It's not just filling up shells.
Mm-hmm.
It's about achieving that, like, perfect arrangement.
Yeah.
This is making me realize how important the arrangement of those tiny electrons is.
It is. It's a delicate dance
Yeah.
of energy and stability.
Okay.
And there's another layer to this
Okay.
that we should talk about.
What's that?
Electron shielding and
Okay.
effective nuclear charge.
Those sounds kind of intimidating.
Okay, yeah.
Can you break those down for us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Let's go back to our skyscraper.
Okay, back to the skyscraper.
Not every floor feels the same pull from the ground, right?
Right.
The higher floors are further away,
Uh-huh.
so the pull is weaker.
Makes sense.
Similarly, in an atom,
Okay.
the inner electrons,
Yeah.
the ones closer to the nucleus,
Uh-huh.
shield the outer electrons
Okay.
from the full force of the nucleus's positive charge.
So it's like those inner electrons are acting as buffers?
Exactly.
That's okay.
Weakening the pull from the ground floor.
Got it.
And that leads to something called effective nuclear charge,
Effective nuclear charge.
which is the net positive charge
Okay.
felt by an outer electron.
So it's like the actual force those social butterfly electrons feel,
Exactly.
taking into account the shielding from the inner electrons.
You got it.
Okay, so the more inner electrons there are,
Yeah.
the weaker the effective nuclear charge felt by those outer electrons.
You got it.
Okay.
And this affects everything from an atom's size
Uh-huh.
to how easily it loses or gains electrons,
Okay.
which directly impacts its chemical behavior.
Okay, my mind is officially blown.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
It's amazing to think about how all these factors,
Mm-hmm.
from the arrangement of electrons
Yeah.
to the forces they experience,
Right.
come together to determine how an atom interacts with the world.
It truly is.
It really
A
is.
fascinating interplay of forces and energy at the atomic level.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground
We have.
from basic shells to those intricate forces at play.
Yeah.
But how do we actually see this reflected in the organization of the elements? That's where the periodic table comes in.
You're right. We can't talk about atoms and elements without mentioning the periodic table.
Yeah.
It's like the address book for all the elements.
Exactly.
But I've always wondered,
Uh-huh.
is there more to it
Okay.
than just listing elements in order?
Yeah.
Does it actually tell us something
Right.
about their atomic structure
Yeah.
and behavior?
Absolutely.
So it really is like the ultimate map of the elements, but I've always seen it as this kind of like static chart.
Right.
Is there more to it than meets the eye?
Yeah, there's a lot more to it.
Okay.
The arrangement of the periodic table, it's not random at all.
Okay.
It's like a secret code
Ooh, a secret code.
that reveals the connections between
Yeah.
electron configuration, element properties, and even how they behave chemically.
Okay, you got my attention.
Okay.
Tell me more about this secret code.
Well, think about how the periodic table is organized.
Okay.
You've got rows called periods and columns called groups.
Right,
The
yeah.
elements in the same period or row.
Okay.
They have the same number of electron shells.
Okay.
So it's like they all have the same number of floors in our skyscraper analogy.
Okay, got it.
So as you move across a period from left to right,
Yeah.
you're essentially adding one electron at a time to the atom.
So it's like adding another tenant to our skyscraper
Exactly.
on each door
Yeah.
as we move across.
Uh-huh. Okay. And those electrons fill up the orbitals
Yeah.
according to the rules that we talk about, the Aufbau principle, the Pauli exclusion principle, and Hund's rule.
Right.
And this filling pattern
Okay.
has a huge impact on the properties of the elements.
That makes sense. So how does this electron filling play out in terms of like how elements actually behave?
Okay, sure.
Can you give us some examples?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let's look at the far left side of the periodic table.
Okay.
Those are the alkali metals.
Alkali metals. Okay.
And they all have just one electron in their outermost shell.
Okay.
They're like the eager singles at a party,
Oh.
desperate to pair up and achieve that stable noble gas configuration.
Okay.
This makes them super reactive.
So they're ready to give up that one electron
Yes.
to bond with another atom
Uh-huh.
and complete their top floor.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now contrast that with the halogens
Okay.
on the other side of the table. In group 17,
Okay.
they're just one electron short of a full outermost shell.
Okay.
So they're like those people at the end of the night hoping to find one last partner.
Okay.
So they're highly reactive too.
Yeah.
But in this case, they're looking to gain an electron rather than lose one.
To complete that shell.
Exactly. They have a high electron affinity, meaning they're eager to snatch up an electron
Uh-huh.
and complete their outer shell.
Yeah.
Just like those noble gases.
Right. And speaking of the noble gases,
Yes.
they're content, right?
They are.
With their full top floor.
Right.
They're like the happy couples enjoying the party,
Yeah.
not looking to interact with anyone else.
Exact.
Stable and unreactive.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I'm seeing the periodic table in a whole new light now.
Good.
It's not just a chart. It's like a map of relationship dynamics between the elements,
Yeah.
all based on their electron configurations.
It really is.
That's pretty cool.
And there's even more to this map.
Okay.
As you move down a group or column on the periodic table,
Uh-huh.
you're essentially adding another shell to your skyscraper.
Okay.
Another floor for electrons.
Got it.
So even though elements in the same group have a different total number of shells,
Okay.
they behave similarly
Yeah.
because they have the same number of electrons in their outermost shell.
So even though they might look different,
Yeah,
the way they behave is similar.
exactly. That consistent outer electron configuration
Okay.
gives those groups
Yeah.
their characteristic behavior.
Makes sense.
Take the alkali metals, for example.
Okay. Alkali metals again.
They all have that one eager electrons in their outermost shell,
Yep.
making them react in similar ways,
Right.
even though they might have different numbers of total shells.
Okay. It's amazing how the periodic table ties all of this together.
It is.
Electron configuration,
Ah.
element properties,
Yeah.
reactivity,
Uh-huh.
and even those subtle energy dynamics we talked about.
Right.
It really makes you appreciate like the elegant order of the universe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And understanding electron configuration is like having a key to unlock that order.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it helps us understand not only how atoms are structured, but also how they interact with each other
Yeah.
and why elements behave the way they do.
Right.
It's the foundation of chemistry.
I have to admit, I'm leaving this deep dive with a whole new perspective on atoms.
Good. I'm glad.
They're not just these tiny, invisible things.
Right.
They're complex and fascinating worlds
Uh-huh.
governed by these like incredible rules.
Yeah.
And knowing those rules
Mm-hmm.
helps us understand so much about the universe around us.
It really does. It's like we've uncovered a secret code.
Yeah.
A way to decipher the language of the universe.
I love that.
And who knows what other mysteries we can unravel.
Right.
By continuing to explore this amazing atomic realm.
This deep dive has definitely sparked my curiosity.
I hope so.
And I hope it's done the same for our listeners.
Yeah, me too.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey into the atom.
It was my pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring and keep asking questions.
Right.